Good evening. Welcome to Blanc Township Board of Trustees meeting for Tuesday, September 22nd. And if we could rise for the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States
of America
and to
the republic
for which
it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, everyone. I'll ask for an approval of the consent agenda and the regular agenda. Ms. Lane? Ms. Lane, you need to unmute yourself.
I move that we approve the consent agenda and the agenda as presented, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Thomas? Looks like you're muted. We can't hear you. You're unmuted, but we can't hear you, Mr. Thomas.
I'll second the motion, Supervisor Bennett, but I want to have an opportunity to discuss.
To discuss, the agenda?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So we've got a second. Any discussion? Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Supervisor Bennett, can you explain to me the Building Board of Appeals?
That is something Ms. Lane brought to my attention. But David, Mr. Laddie, can you explain that?
Yeah, the Building Board of Appeals is required by the Michigan Building Code in order to hear appeals or decisions from a building department regarding regulations in that code. So for example, and I'm not an expert in this area, but let's say that there was some dispute about the quality of insulation that somebody was proposing to install in a house. If it was different than the building code, then and there was a dispute about issuing a building permit from the department, then that person could go to that Building Board of Appeals and seek relief under that regulation.
Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
Through you, Supervisor Bennett, to Attorney Laddie, if that's okay.
Yep, go ahead.
Attorney Laddie, how long is this? Is this a new ordinance? Is this a new law? And how long have we been out of compliance if it isn't new?
No, we've had a Building Board of Appeals for more than a decade. Now, I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm not sure on how our rotation goes for appointments to that Board of Appeals, but I can tell you that we've had this in place for more than a decade.
So these are reappointments. These aren't. This isn't something new we're instituting. This is just a reappointment of the people that have been on it. Go ahead, Mr. Thomas.
So, Supervisor Bennett, so this is works hand in hand with the Zoning Board of Appeals, or is this just completely different? I'm sorry, because I've never seen this before.
Yeah.
It's the same theory for the building code.
Well, the
Okay.
The ZBA doesn't get called out unless there's a request, and the same with this. So we may not have seen it because we don't have a whole lot of disputes about building code. So since we adopt, basically the state's or it's the national standards for most of these building codes and electrical, what have you. Any other questions, Mr. Mansour?
Yeah. So, in terms of the agenda, I would like to propose a couple of changes to the operating issues. I guess it's my understanding that items E and F regarding the repeal of the public hearing are no longer necessary for this board. So if we're not going to need to repeal anything, then I would propose to remove them.
I agree. That's correct.
Okay. So E and F?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the other, and I guess we'll have to go back to Clerk Lane and Mr. Thomas, if they're okay. Then the other item here is that I would like to add a topic here that says the board will discuss the draft water ordinance that Attorney Laddie distributed. I guess it was a week and a half, or maybe 10 days ago, something like that. So just to discuss it, I don't think we're in any kind of a position to approve it, but I do want to bring it up.
We can discuss it. I told Clerk Lane that my understanding was we were going to discuss it when we actually had the presentation or had the information from the presentation, but we can discuss it. It's not an issue.
Thank you.
So we'll add that to the end, item H.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, can I just make one point about the Granville Estates resolutions?
Yes.
We're taking those off the agenda because we're going to move ahead with the cost hearings that are currently set for October 8th. So it's full steam ahead on that, and that's why those resolutions will be taken off the agenda.
Okay, so we've got some suggested changes to the motion. Ms. Lane?
I'm willing to accept the changes, Mr. Bennett.
Okay, and it was supported by Mr. Thomas. Do you accept the change, Mr. Thomas?
I accept the changes, Supervisor Bennett.
Okay, go ahead, Ms. Lane.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Adkins,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
With that, we're going to move to citizen comment. And let me see here. I think we have one of our first comments here is Judge Maribel. Good evening, Judge. You need to unmute yourself, Judge. Please unmute yourself, Judge Maribel. There you go. Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
That's fantastic. Good evening, Mr. Chair.
Good evening.
You hearing me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Two things I wanted to bring up tonight. It is fall. The leaves are actually changing. I saw some that changed just I don't know, maybe over the weekend. And that is the time for the Judge Maribel Student of the Month program, where I usually put out the information in Genesee County about our Student of the Month program. It is for 10th graders here in Genesee County, and we have been conducting the program now since 2004. The purpose of the program is to encourage students to focus in on their education and to take their career goals seriously. We've serviced probably about 120 students over the last 16 years, and it's always delightful for me to be able to watch them grow up. It's you fill with pride when you see some of them. Two of my students I just would mention. One is running for county commissioner. I think he cleared a primary, and I heard he has no opposition, so he's going to be on the county commission in the fall or in January. Another one of my students I swore in as an attorney, and she ran for state representative in a special election this year. So, in any event, we have had students from Blanc in the past, and with schools around the county being in flux, some of them being in buildings, some of them being online, we are still accepting these applications from students. You can go to judgemarable.net. That's Judge MARABLE.net, and download an application. So we'd love to see more students involved in our program. So I don't know if anybody has any questions about that.
Thank you very much, Judge Maribel. We appreciate your service to the community.
It's a great program, yeah.
The second item is I did clear the primary, and I am a candidate for circuit court here in Genesee County. And for those residents of the township that voted, supported me, I want to say thank you. And for those who may have supported another candidate, I hope to win your vote. I did well in at least 2 precincts in the township. So if anybody has questions about my candidacy, I'm certainly open to listening to those. I don't know if anybody's going to ask at this point, but I most certainly can be reached by 810-597-7795 if somebody wants to get a hold of me. And again, Mr. Supervisor, thank you for thanking me for the service to the community. It has been my immense honor and pleasure to serve as a district judge in this county for the last 20 years. And I'm very much hopeful that I'll be able to bring that experience to the circuit court and serve the entire county. Some of you may be aware that the courts were closed for about 100 days due to the COVID situation. I mean, obviously, these are very difficult times and interesting times. I mean, we're meeting by Zoom. Whoever heard of Zoom, 9 months ago? Nobody. But that's what we're doing in the court system. We're conducting hearings by Zoom, but it's hard to conduct trials that way. And one of the things about having 20 years of experience is that you learn how to do things in court under adverse conditions. And this is certainly an adverse situation to run a courtroom with Zoom or limited access to the court. But I think we are handling that. And this is an event that is going to change probably the way we run courts for a long time in the future. There are some good things that have come out of some of the virtual conferences, but there are some downsides too. I would consider it a downside when my court recorder has to tell somebody before we go live that they better put a shirt on, So, or somebody's driving in their car and trying to attend a hearing. So, we're making our way through it, and certainly want to let you know about that.
Well, thank you very much again, Judge Maribel, for your service. And we know that this last 6 months has changed a lot of ways that people do business. So thank you very much, and have a good evening and good luck with your election. Okay, Mr. Beller, any other guests or residents or citizens wish to make comment at this time?
If you do have a comment, please use a raise hand signal in the bottom right-hand corner of your participant view. Right now we have Al Johnson.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. My name is Al Johnston. I live at 9291 Sand Hill Drive in the Grand Reserve community. I'm present this evening to speak about using treated well water for irrigation of lawns and green areas. It is my understanding the township took the opportunity to irrigate a park with well water instead of the more expensive water provided for our homes. I totally support this as a method to conserve a natural resource and to be cost efficient as well. In Grand Reserve, we have 4 small parks, 432 homes, and additional green space that contributes to the beauty of the community. The cost of irrigation for our lawns and common areas is extremely high due to the current ordinance, which forces us to use township water. We understand the value of paying for township water going into our homes and do not wish to change that arrangement. However, our developer provided us with 4 wells. We would like to use them. And with an investment to enhance our capacity, we could conserve a natural resource and be cost efficient, just like the township. When one thinks of public utilities, it is easy to think of examples of how they serve residents. They're not formed to drum up revenue like competitive companies. In fact, it is common for public utilities to serve residents by offering advice on how to conserve and lower costs. We can all think about visits from our gas and electric companies that provide free light bulbs and ideas for insulation, perhaps promoting solar power. I would love to see the conservation of water treated in the same manner. As you move forward, we will support the safe and cost-effective use of well water for irrigation purposes. We have been patiently waiting. Please consider the information in front of you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnston. I think we have another hand raised, Mr. Beller. I saw.
Yes, Kylie.
Okay, Miss Kylie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. I'm Kylie McCready at 2300 Russell Street, and I have a question regarding our recycling. They had one recycling about maybe a month ago, and it was everybody in Genesee County, I think, showed up. I was waiting, and I finally just left with all my recyclables. I don't want to throw them in the landfill, so I was wondering if we are any closer to having maybe a few more, so that we can recycle some of the stuff that we have and not throw it into the landfill?
Good question. Actually, Genesee Beautiful is the group that organizes those recycle days, Miss McCready. And because of the COVID issue, they refrained from scheduling those major events. We've been fortunate enough to, in the past, to have those scheduled to be located within our township. But this year they have not, that I'm not aware of any that they've scheduled. However, I'll post again. I have posted in the past some permanent sites where you can take these some of these materials that our typical weekly recycle pickup doesn't pick up. But
Yeah, because I have like some old computers and batteries and light bulbs and this kind of stuff that I don't want to put in our landfill.
Okay, I will post the site that you can go to that will tell you where you can take each of those items. But Genesee County does have a site that will direct you to all those, and I'll make sure we post that. Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, to the residents, the Genesee County Planning Commission's hotline number for recycling is 810-762-7744 for those things that they don't recycle in the township.
Okay, very good. We'll
That'll handle hazardous waste as well.
Okay. We will post that, Ms. McCready, and as well as the website.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Beller, anybody else have their hand raised?
I'm not seeing anybody else with the hand raise, but for some reason the chat function isn't on my computer.
Okay.
So I don't know if we can have them text somewhere or.
Yeah. What I would suggest is just some little bit clearer instructions. If you are on the Zoom meeting, you go down to the bottom of the page and click on the Participants tab at the bottom of the screen. And what that'll bring up is a list of the complete list of all the participants. At the bottom of that list, there should be a hand raise feature. You click on that and it'll raise your hand. Mr. Massey, did you have a clarification on the comment? Or?
I have a comment to make.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Massey.
Can I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead. We do have somebody, Mr. Yancho, does want to speak as well, but go ahead.
Let him speak before I do.
Okay. Mr. Beller, do you see Mr. Yancho on there? Mr. Beller? Let's see if I can find. don't see Mr. Yancho.
I don't see him either.
I did get a text from him saying that he wishes to speak.
Yeah, I don't see him on the list. Maybe it's one of those phone numbers.
Tell you what, we'll patch him in. I'm not sure where Mr. Beller is, but anyways.
I'm here. I don't see him on there.
Okay.
Might be a telephone number.
Mr. Yancho? We'll put you on speakerphone here because we can't find you on meeting.
Yeah, I couldn't connect to the Zoom for whatever reason.
Okay. Go ahead.
Are out in the country.
All right. Go ahead, Mr. Yancho.
I would just like to comment on the information regarding the trustee access to personnel files of the employees and other personnel of the township. And I hope that our township board will support action to limit access to the township employees and other members of the township other than the board that they belong to, and that if they wish access to those people or have questions of those people, that those items be directed to the supervisor or superintendent or through the entire board. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Yancho.
Thank you,
Okay.
board and supervisor.
Okay. Thank you. Good night. Mr. Beller, anybody else?
Yes, we have Buck Frederickson.
Okay, Mr. Frederickson.
Yes, this is Buck Frederickson. I'm from 6522 Prairie Dunes, also in the Grand Reserve. And I would just like to reiterate what Al Johnson also said too, that I'm just kind of finding it hard to believe that, you know, you're making us put treated water on our lawns. And I just, you know, I like to be a conservative too, especially with the water. So I would just like to reiterate what he said. That's all.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Frederickson. Mr. Beller, anyone else?
I've got one labeled iPad 2. Should be able to unmute themselves. There you go.
Go ahead.
My name is Dan McShane. I live at 6208 Marion Lane in the Grand Reserve, and I attended the fall meeting where we initially discussed a survey that was being done, and we were told that by a couple of months, probably January, that survey regarding a rate study would be done. I understand COVID stepped into the picture, which threw a lot of things out of whack in March, but I would hope that the board would seriously consider at this meeting, if not at the next meeting, making the changes needed to allow us to conserve water. The water that we use in our homes, it's fine, but for irrigation, it does not really make sense. I appreciate the board allowing me to speak, and hopefully you'll be able to take this under advisement and pass the revision. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Beller, anybody else?
Got Bob Mummy.
Okay, Mr. Money.
You got to unmute yourself.
There we go.
There we go.
My name's Bob Mumey, 6510 Prairie Dunes, also in Grand Reserve Community. We've been impatiently waiting for 1.5 years, as recently mentioned. And as Dan mentioned, 80 of us were present at the Township Board meeting last November 14th. This irrigation issue is very important to the more than 700 residents here in Grand Reserve. As I read the motion that was made and passed on August 25th, that was passed on August 26th and did not include any language to discuss or look at the water rate study, which could have been presented on Zoom 6 months ago. Mr. Laddie was given language, and we expected, as
all the rest of us have mentioned tonight, plus many others, we expected this to be acted on at tonight's meeting. So we hear now that it's been added to the agenda, for which we say thank you. I hope it can be acted on at the next meeting if it needs to be discussed any further. This needs to be resolved soon. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Okay. Mr. Beller, anybody else that...
I don't see anybody else.
Okay, Mr. Massey?
Yes, I would like to state to the superintendent and to Mrs. Marie Hoffman that you guys are engaging in blatant racism. I have proof that you guys have circulated some information directly talking about what you're going to do to me. Miss Maria name is all over the information. I got a copy of it. And you guys have been doing this, and also Scott, you allowed, Scott Bennett, the supervisor, allowed them to print some information that is blatantly racism when they said, came out of the HR department, that we only have one black employee in the township. That was written. That was written. You only have one black employee in the township, and that is interpreted as that's the way we're going to keep it, regardless what you say. Now, on the other hand, if you're going to write up something about me coming to the township, once you put in there, Scott, you know this is true. When I was there on that day, I knocked on your door twice. You cannot deny that, because it's written in the statement that I knocked on your. Someone said I knocked on your door, that they saw me, but I knocked on your door twice, and you told me, well, I'm on the call right now. Just wait, and I'll get back in touch with you. That's what you told me. Now, I was there to see you. And also, while I was there, supervisor, I asked the HR person, can the trustees look into an employee's file? The HR person said no. The statute of the Michigan Township Association says yes. You can ask Attorney Laddie that. He knows the statute quite well. He knows it better than I do. That if there's a reason to look into an employee's file, yes, the township trustees can do that. That's a fact. Now come back and contradict me on that. Call the MTA and ask Mr. Laddie. Now, furthermore, I'm tired of this racism BS. You're doing it, Scott. You are behind it. I got a copy of Marie Hoffman, what she has said, what she gonna do to me. I got a copy of it. Okay? You guys, you're behind it, Scott. You're trying to hide your face like a real nice guy, but you're dirty too. And I'm just telling you. And now you're trying to come up and say blacks should not be allowed at the township. We're gonna come up with a policy. That's what the policy is all about. I just want to know that you got racism, and I'm not gonna stand here and sit here and take it, Scott. Now, I'll tell you something else. You guys been throwing shit in my lawn, and I'm tired of that shit. Don't throw no dead rabbits and cats in my lawn anymore. Here, Scott? I'm just telling you, you're part of that. I've been picking up dead cats, dead fish, dead rats in my lawn, okay? You're sending people by to throw shit into my lawn. Now I'm tired of it. Now keep it up.
I don't even know where you live, Joe.
Yes, you do, Scott.
I know what.
Telling the damn lie.
I know what subdivision you live in. Anyways, okay. Are you done, Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Okay. Just for the public information, I'm not sure what Mr. Massey is referring to as far as anything written. Mr. Mansour at the last meeting asked for copies of the grievances that two different unions filed and the background information regarding that. We actually have a procedure or policy on how we handle grievances. Yeah, those are investigated, and actually one of the employees that's involved in it is willing to speak tonight. I'm not sure I'm going to get into that right now in the middle of a board meeting. However, in terms of racism, I did not make any comments with regard to any of these statements. Whatever was printed in these documents is testimony from the employees and from Mr. Massey. I asked Chief Wiles to conduct the interview with Mr. Massey, and also our HR person interviewed the individual staff members that made the complaint. And the employee who made the complaint is texting me and saying to let you know that he is black. And so if racism is a factor, he is the one that made the complaint, and he's willing to stand up and not hide behind it as far as his complaint. He's willing to come forward and did come forward. So as far as me making any complaint or any comments, I don't have any comments in there. In fact, I think if you look at the meeting from this last board meeting, you'll see that pretty much I didn't take any sides with it. I said that the employees made a complaint. Mr. Massey is not, he's denying it, and there's really no reason to try and decide which way to come down on it, other than that we need to come up with a policy to address this to protect both the township trustees and the employees. So at that, we'll bring it up later in the meeting when we come to the policy. Okay, and we'll talk about the employee files at that time as well. Mr. Mansour, you to unmute yourself.
Yep, sure. If we can move on, I'm willing to make the motion to award the IT assessment RFP to Sentinel for $27,875 supervisor sign-on purchase contracts, but I'd like some discussion, please.
Yeah, Mr. Beller, Ms. Lane?
I'll support that for discussion.
Okay. I'd like Mr. Beller to come on, our IT director. Mr. Beller?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Last year around the end of the year, we put out an RFP to have our an IT assessment done on our current infrastructure. For years, we've been working, trying to keep everything operational and upgrading things whenever we need to. But whenever we put out the RFP, we received about 10 RFPs, and as we was getting ready to review those, we had some unforeseen circumstances that caused us to delay that, and then COVID hit, and so we kind of put that on hold. Since the COVID, and that we're back operational as much as we can, and with the technology we've gotten now to conduct these meetings online, as well as the ability to work from home, it just kind of shows the importance of us needing to get this IT assessment completed, just to kind of see where we're at and what we need to do to upgrade our technology that will support some of this expanding technology. And so we reviewed the 10 RFPs that we received, and then selected 4 of them. The 4 you've got in the packet, and we selected Sentinel. We have Matt Mergsta here from Sentinel that can speak more on that.
Let's get through the presentation, Mr. Massey, before we ask any questions.
Okay. So what we're wanting to do is take a look at our current infrastructure, our IT software, taking a look at everything that is involved with IT, and kind of seeing where we can make improvements, make sure our security's there, that especially with the technology the way it is, we want a secure environment, and maybe there's even opportunities to maybe move a lot of this stuff off site and be able to work more efficiently from home if need be. Once we kind of determine, what some people can do from home versus, who needs to be in the offices. So.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've actually, over the years, with the growing technology, is we've never really had an overall plan of how we are going to put together our technology. And it basically has been, hey, we need another server, let's add that. Hey, we need a new phone system, let's put that in. And what this will do is, just like a master plan for the township or a master plan for our building facilities, this will give us a master plan for what we currently have, where we're lacking. One of the concerns that I have is that, and a number of our staff, as well as Robbie, is that if for some reason we had a shutdown of our technology, whether it was a server going down or something along that line, or ransomware come in, like other municipalities have, it could shut us down. I mean, the county was shut down for I think for a week or more, actually, due to something along these lines, and can be devastating. So, Robbie, did you want to bring Mr. Mers in?
Yes, Mr. Mers is on.
Okay. Good evening.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to come on tonight and just summarize what we intend to do with this project. As Robbie had also stated, our goal with this project is to partner with the township, engage with the stakeholders, understand the IT challenges and the intended business outcomes that the township has for its technology, and make sure that we're achieving positive outcomes for the township and its residents.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mr. Mansur, do you have some questions?
Yeah. Yes, I didn't. I think Trustee Massey had some as well. But so in the packet that was distributed, there was 3 different bids, 3 different amounts of money. Sentinel was in the middle in terms of the cost. And then there was, I think, a 15, 16-page proposal about what Sentinel was going to do. My question is this. I mean, what were the parameters that were used in order to select Sentinel? I mean, what was in the RFP, and how was the comparison made? Because none of that information was included in the packet.
Robbie, well, one of the things we did was that a number of us sat down. Matt Kimmer, who works with GIS in our DPW department, Mr. Beller, obviously, Mr.
Charles Moran.
I'm sorry?
Charles Moran, our IT technician.
Charles Moran, Melissa from my office, myself. We sat through several of these presentations. I think that what Sentinel offered is what we're looking at is somebody that we can partner with on an ongoing basis to help us with not just coming up with a plan, but implementing it. It's real simple to just kind of do an assessment and hand it off to us and say, here you go. But what we're looking at is being able to have a partner that can say, okay, here's the plan, here's what the priorities are in terms of what we need to put in place first. Here's the biggest vulnerabilities you have, and let's work from there to the least of your issues. And I guess with any kind of service contract, a lot of this is it's hard to quantify in numerical or I guess very objective ways, but it is subjective. But it's the folks here that are going to be working with these people, and they're probably the people that impressed us the most with the job they would do and the presentation that they provided us.
So I just have one quick follow-up then. If we could just have an idea of the dimensions on which these the evaluation was made. Just obviously cost is one of them. Maybe something in the what do you call it, the comprehensiveness maybe of the approach. But I'd just like to have something in the record to say that these are the kind of dimensions we did the evaluation on. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Massey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Supervisor. I have a question for you, Mr. Supervisor. As I recall, a few months ago before COVID hit, we approved a big package for IT. And that package was for a lot of updates. What can you connect it to what we're doing now versus that money we approved for those updates to IT?
Mr. Beller?
I believe the one was for the upgrade to our phone system. And so we had that approved at the end of last year to upgrade our phone system. That was just our phone system. All this other stuff is more along the line of our servers, our switches, our infrastructure, mainly seeing where we need to be at as far as our whole IT network is concerned.
Mr. Robbie.
Yes.
I thought that it was for, when you said phone system, let me So to clarify something here. If I'm wrong, correct me, please, okay? It had something to do with putting up, blocking barriers so we would have better communication. Also, some, as I recall, in some areas in the township hall, you have very poor communication. We supposed to have been rectifying that.
We haven't done anything as far as the communication.
He's speaking of the Wi-Fi, Robbie.
Yeah, we haven't updated that in a couple years.
But I thought that was in that package, Robbie.
In which package?
In that package that we voted on for the phone system to be rectified.
Oh, that's for the paging system is what I think you're looking at. But yeah, the paging system wasn't part of that. It's we can do the paging and we still can do the paging, but that was mainly with our phone system and the speaker systems for the phones.
But we did upgrade the Wi-Fi a couple years ago.
Yeah, a couple years ago was Wi-Fi, but I think what you're talking about may be the paging system.
Okay.
And we're still able to do the paging.
Have you completed that project?
Yes, that project's completed. There's some, I mean, the paging system, it integrates with our existing paging system, but we'll have to do some updates to the paging system itself because the one we have is old. And over in the police department, they don't have any speakers in the building similar to what we have here.
So is it a good time now to take care of that problem too?
Not right. I mean, what this IT assessment's going to do is take a look at our entire infrastructure, including our phone systems. I mean, I'm sure that they can look at that, but a lot of this is just the IT side of things, our networking, how data is moved in and out, how we provide data to our public, and, you know, our infrastructures and security settings, because, I mean, you know, look at the cybersecurity. Today, it's pretty rampant at people trying to access data that they don't have access to.
So let me ask you a question. You brought up an interesting thought as you were speaking. Have we ever had any hackers at the township?
We have had not hackers, but we've had some people open up emails that starts a download or some ransomware, but we've caught it and we've had everything backed up and able to restore that stuff. But you know, with the backup and the amount of data that we're backing up on a regular basis, I think it's time that we probably need to look at backing stuff up off-site. And so I've been looking into some of those. Some of them are, you know, backing up to the cloud where you can, you know, if need be, if something were to happen here, a catastrophe, a server goes down, we can basically flip a switch and be able to start pulling our data and working off of that cloud. And, you know, this might be an opportunity to look into moving a lot of our resources, our information out to the cloud and be able to access it not only from here in the township, but, you know, maybe from home, as people might be looking to work from home in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Atkins?
No, I think Mr. Beller kind of summed it up, what I was looking for, but I just in terms of the ability for some departments, some personnel to work from home, I think this could give good data points to department heads to make that determination going forward, which I think is could be more productive for some people. It's not for everyone, but some people tends to work good for.
My biggest concern actually is the security of the information and the robustness of our system. We've never really examined or had an outside group come in and take a look at how things are constructed. I mean, we talk about when somebody builds a house, making sure that it's built solidly, but in terms of our IT, we have tens of thousands of people relying on this township and the information that we have here, whether it's tax information, assessing information, planning information, voting information. Can you imagine if we had a computer glitch November 3rd? I don't even want to imagine that. We need to make sure that our system is robust enough that we've got backups for what happens. I also serve on the 911 consortium here in Genesee County and Midland. When they had the flood took out their 911 center. They needed to be able to move to another location and set up operations immediately. The same would go for this township. If we had a fire or a natural disaster, we need to be able to operate within probably 72 hours at another location. And right now, we're not able to do that. So this is about security and about making sure that our township can operate even after some kind of disaster, whether it's a natural disaster or technology disaster. Mr. Massey?
Mr. Chair, I would like to see you put that on the agenda for discussion at our next meeting.
What's that?
That's about the catastrophe of technology or fire, whatever it may be. I'd like for that to be on the agenda for discussion, that we start having a conversation about that before we are faced with a disaster.
Well, that's part of the idea behind getting this assessment is getting prepared for that, because one of the things that we have to be prepared to do is to be able to go somewhere else, whether it's from our homes or from another location, and be able to have access to all of our information remotely. Right now, we probably could limp through some things being able to access it remotely, but collection of taxes. So I believe this is the beginning of that discussion. Mr. Mirza, how long did we say that we're probably looking at for this assessment to be done?
Yeah, it would be probably about 4 to 6 weeks in duration. And just to kind of respond to some of the comments, one of the key deliverables for this engagement will be a disaster recovery plan. So identifying opportunities to move data and applications offsite, making them highly available, and making recovery in the event of a failure, almost seamless. Hopefully down to a matter of minutes to recover, servers and applications and access to data.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's wise for us to look at that, Mr. Massey, as we move through this study and get the information back. And I think we can make better choices and decisions in terms of how we are going to deal with that. Mr. Atkins?
I understand a little better now. Apologize, Mr. Fowler, when we're talking remote working. I was thinking in terms of what kind of the new standard is. No, I understand now in case of some sort of an event, being able to access information and collect it and maintain it. So, understand.
Yeah, I think one other thing, also look at our staffing levels. For now, and for the last 6-7 years, we've been operating with essentially 2.5 people. One is kind of a half-time GIS person, and then the other two are myself. I'm a GIS and IT. I have a background more GIS, but we've been kind of working through this with 2.5 people, and with the amount of data we have, we're also looking at staffing levels as well.
Any other questions, Mr. Beller or Mr. Mirza?
Just to add, Mr. Bennett, that one of the things that we will probably recommend through the findings of the IT assessment are additional assessments or follow-on assessments. One of those will likely be a business resilience workshop where we will really kind of detail out a lot of the business objectives for providing that disaster recovery and that high availability. So just wanted to make sure that the members of the board understand that this IT assessment will lead to other opportunities to help the township build out its capabilities in that area.
Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, just one more question here, I think. Thank you. Has Sentinel done work for the township before? And are there any other municipalities that you have worked with in the recent past?
Yes. Well, actually, the first answer is no, we have not worked with Grand Blanc Township. But yes, we do service local government across Michigan, Illinois, southern Wisconsin, and Arizona. So we have a number of reference accounts that are similar in size and similar needs to Grand Blanc Township. So if there's interest in us presenting some of those, we could do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas?
Supervisor Bennett, to you. seeing that this would be your bailiwick in a profession, would this lower our premiums on our insurance? I know that we are covered for catastrophes and man-made and such, but would this lower our insurance? If we follow.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure. They don't ask any questions with regard to where we're at with IT, but you know, the problem with even having a claim on this is that, you know, you're going to basically be, you know, let's say that we had a breach of our system or a loss of information. No matter how much money we get paid for that thing, we're not getting the information back, and you know, it's going to be on our head as a board that why weren't we better prepared for this? And so I'm not sure about the insurance question, but I do know that it's insurance for us in a way, in that it saves our neck and saves our residents if we, you know, as Mr. Mirza says, that, you know, the plan is to be able to be up and running within, you know, minutes or an hour after the shutdown. You know, even if we had a major loss of power in this area for a period of time, I know we have a generator here, but they could, you know, I'm familiar with a lot of businesses that, you know, the power surge knocks out servers, knocks out a lot of things, and we could have something as simple as that. But I'm not sure about the insurance if it would lower it, but it sure would lower the potential, you know, fallout. I know that.
Could lower the angst. All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions? We had a motion on that, Ms. Lane? I'm trying to remember.
Yes, we had a motion and support, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Any other discussion? Ms. Lane, call for the vote.
Mr. Mansour?
Yes.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Thomas?
Yes.
Mr. Gruzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Beller. Thank you, Mr. Mersda.
Thank you.
Okay. Item B, the board will consider a motion to authorize distribution and public review of the Grand Blanc Township Master Plan, version marked draft for public and interagency review dated September 2020 in accordance with the Michigan Planning Enabling Act PA 33 of 2008. Mr. Thomas?
So moved.
Second.
Who seconded that? Was that?
Mr. Massey?
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Discussion. I'd like to ask Mr. Lloyd to be brought on to the meeting. I know he had some brief comments with regard to the plan.
Sure thing. Hi.
Good evening, Mr. Lloyd.
Good evening. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for supporting this effort. About 18 months ago, you gave us the green light to move forward with this master plan, and I just want to thank you. So let me start, for everyone's benefit, the audience and so on, just to give a small background on the master plan itself, and then some details about what we've done. The document itself, it's a guiding document, it's a policy document, it's not a regulatory document. And what that means is it identifies and describes the community's visions for its long-term future. And in this case, and in most, it's about a 10 to 20 year projection. And it's important to recognize this is not a zoning ordinance. It simply sets policy, gives you a big picture of the kinds of things you would expect to see, and then you adopt the policy, the regulations to implement that. And it covers this document covers about everything. It's an analysis of our community, the residential, commercial, industrial, transportation facilities, public facilities, infrastructure, and of course natural features. As you mentioned, Mr. Bennett, it is supported through the Michigan Planning Enabling Act of 2008. And that's what provides the legal basis for creating a plan. And it does, in fact, require that we update this every 5 years. And this plan will, in fact, set the stage for public and private investment in the future. This isn't our first plan, of course. We've had many of them over the years. Our most recent ones that we're working off are from 2010 and 2013. So, as you can tell, they're a little bit dated. And just to give you an idea of how we got here, back in 2017 and 18, the Planning Commission completed their review, the 5-year review of the plans, the 2013 plan, and at that time it was determined that we did need to do an update. Some of you will remember that we had a joint meeting with the board in 2018, and at that time it was decided and directed to move forward. At that time, we also had a proposal from our current planning consultant, and at that time their proposal was for $80,000, and we thought we might be able to do a little better than that, and so we decided to do an RFP, and we created a selection committee, and that selection committee consisted of Dan Gellings, who's the chair of the Planning Commission, Mr. Mansour, who's a board member, Mr. Laddie, who's our township attorney, and myself. So we went through, looked at 5 proposals, decided on 3 to really boil down to 3, and then take a look, and then came forward with a recommendation to select Beckett and Rader for an amount of $40,000. So we ended up getting a great plan done for about half the price that our onboard consultant was going to charge us. So we think we got a good deal there, of course. And another thing that was kind of cool is that the lead planner, Leah Dumichel, she was actually a Bobcat. She graduated from Grand Blanc High School, so we thought that was kind of a nice addition. It's always nice to have somebody from home helping out. And we also created a steering committee after that, and that steering committee helped us to oversee and guide the entire process. And that steering committee was, again, it was Mr. Dan Gellings, Al Mansour, David Laddie, myself. We had the local developer, Mr. Chuck Sakrinas, Joy Finkenbeiner. She's from
Genesis.
I want to say Genesis, but it's Ascension. And Mr. Boggs, Greg Boggs, one of the DPW guys, and Jay Johnson, a planning commission member. So we had a pretty good steering committee that helped put the document together. And once we got done with putting all that together, of course, we handed it over to the Planning Commission. And that took about 1.5 years, 18 months or so. And remember, we did stumble at the end of that through the COVID time, but that was when we were writing things. So we didn't really get affected too bad by COVID. We were really in the process of doing a lot of our writing and wrapping things up. So, we didn't get hurt too bad from that. What I would like to do is take a moment to run through a very quick, whoops, I need to undo that. It's a very quick presentation, if I could. I'm going to share my screen. And I think this will do it. There. And all I need to do here is just get to the show. This will really just take me a second once I get started. Thank you for your patience. Anyway, we're going to do this, a quick presentation, give you a little bit of a sense of the document itself and what we've done. As mentioned, the project started with Beckett and Rader back in February 2019, and the steering committee was formed with a list of mutual expectations. The steering committee did, in fact, meet monthly to review the content of each master plan section. So what happened is we would discuss the issues that we were looking at, and then we had the consultant go back and from those conversations write those sections, present those sections to the steering committee, do a comprehensive review with the steering committee, and then move on to whatever the next item might end up being. The document review included, tons of documents, but here's some of the more outstanding ones. We had the entire corridor plans reviewed. One thing that we are going to do with the Hill Road and Holly Road corridor plans is that we're going to render them substantially complete. So in other words, what we've determined is that those plans that were done, back in the mid and early 90s, we've incorporated most of that information into the township's zoning ordinance and put them in as regulations. So we don't need to continue to reference them when we're looking at projects. It's really very cumbersome. So we've determined that that wasn't necessarily going to be a critical thing, and we thought it would be a good idea to actually consider those completed. The Saginaw Street Corridor study from 2008, the master plan does in fact advance that study quite considerably. As you'll see, we also went into a tech village planning era. Most of you will remember that. We used the 2010 plan. We used the supplemental amendment. We have the village master plan, the market assessment. We have the zoning ordinance. And, of course, we have the downtown development plan and tax increment financing plan. All of that was used. And I'll make a comment about that effort and emphasize the fact that with Tech Village and the DDA in particular, very important to point out that the master plan is very supportive of economic development efforts in the community. They reference a number of things, the plans, the DDA. We identify the north area of town as an area that we need to concentrate some efforts on from a redevelopment and an economic development standpoint. But keep in mind that the plan is very supportive of the Downtown Development Authority, the Tech Village project, and the other things associated with it. One thing I would point out is that we also ended up incorporating some language in there to reference the interest that the township might have in creating incentives to incentivize development and maybe find a way to get some of the areas developed that we've struggled with historically in getting them done. So the mapping process, as you can see a couple of the background maps here, there's just so much information that comes from that. Behind me over here, I've got a handful of maps. Some of that shows the lifestyle of our community, how the internet access, the median age of folks, the median income. So there's just an awful lot of data that comes from, doing a master plan. And that's one of the key objectives, is to obtain updated data that helps you to reference what we're up to. And as I mentioned, we did a very, very comprehensive community engagement series of exercises, and all of these are representative of that. We had 747 responses to our surveys, and that's a very big number. I think historically we've really seen maybe upwards of a couple of hundred responses, and in this case we got nearly 750. We also took it upon ourselves through the discussions that we thought it would be important to understand what the community's students had to say about their future in our township. And so we did surveys there, 111 surveys there, different than the other community surveys, and they conducted 5 workshops in 5 different classes. So, again, that was a pretty impressive amount of work, and great information was obtained from that. We learned a lot about how and what we might do in the future.
Mr. Lloyd, did you want to show some of those slides? Because if you want to, just click on that enable editing, and the slideshow will come up if you wanted.
Oh, you're not able to see them?
No, if you click on that, if you click on that,
I'm sorry. It says here I'm sharing my screen. Sorry.
Well, if you click on that enable editing on the PowerPoint presentation, it will allow your slides to be shown. If you click on the presentation, there.
Okay.
Well, you need to get rid of that enable editing thing, and it will show them a lot bigger. Right there above where it says enable editing.
Down.
Protected view in the yellow thread.
Good.
We're going to presentation mode.
I'm seeing view. I'm so sorry.
Down a half inch.
Right here.
Over to the right.
Oh, that box. Okay.
There you go.
Sorry, folks. Well, shoot, you're probably going to want me to start over, aren't you?
No.
Well, anyway, thank you for catching that. I apologize for my deal there. But in any event, let me, I'll go to current slide. There we go. So I've gone through this slide. We did do a lot of community engagement. The one thing I would point out, we tried real hard to make this meeting in a box work. And it did work a little bit here and there, but I have to say, it wasn't as robust as I was expecting it to be. We had a lot of high hopes there. It went okay, but I didn't think it was nearly as effective as I wanted it to be. But that sure didn't take away from the volume and the quality of the responses that we did in fact receive. This just gives you an idea of how and when. The plan was distributed to the steering committee from the consultant on July 9th. So we were done working through the steering committee and put all the pieces together back in July of 2002. And then a couple of weeks later, we gave it off to the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission had it for a little bit. And then once they were done, they decided that it was complete and ready for distribution. And so they're asking this evening for the Township Board to authorize that distribution. And this is where we're at. We've gone through the steering committee. We put that together. We've gone through the township staff. We've gone through the Planning Commission. We've looked at that and brought it to the board. We're asking you to authorize the required 63-day review period. And what happens there is it goes out to to all of the neighboring communities. We put it in the newspaper, of course. The public is made aware of it. And also during that time, we will conduct at least one more public hearing, and depending on the outcome of comments and stuff, we may need more, but we'll have a public hearing at the Planning Commission. Plus, we'll have another open house or a workshop coming up before too long. And we're hoping that we can do the workshop in a way that takes advantage of the technologies if we're, still kind of behind the curve on this coronavirus thing, keeping us, limited in the ability to engage. But one of the things that I'll be doing is just opening my doors and allowing and asking the public and board members and others to come on in and sit down and have a chat with me. I may even set up some hours in my office to accommodate this, depending on how it goes. But I want to make sure that I'm available. If the public, anybody from the public wants to come in and talk about it, and then we'll move through all of that. We'll do the public hearing, and then the Planning Commission will be the body that adopts the item as final. So that, in a nutshell, is our master plan, and we're ready to distribute it if the board is ready to authorize that.
Any questions of Mr. Lloyd? I can't see everybody right now. Let me see here. If you want to go ahead and turn back.
I can stop sharing?
There you go.
How's that?
Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Lloyd?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Massey.
I have a question. Out of those, how many responses you had from the community? Was it 400 or 700?
It's 747, sir.
Okay. Did you like the response that you got?
Well, I like it because we have a lot, and the fact is that there's a lot of interest in our community, and I'll just point this out, if you don't mind, in economic development, and working on the north end of town of our non-motorized efforts, putting our non-motorized plan in place, at economic development and in around the Technology Village area, and of course their support for the DDA. So, from that standpoint, I love it. It's a lot of what we had already thought about, and probably most of us had already considered to some extent, that these are the kinds of things that we would want to emphasize. And having the community respond and give us support for those kinds of things, wonderful. Because the whole idea here is to put this plan together to identify what the community is interested in having done in Grand Blanc Township, and then it's our responsibility to implement that. And so, they're right in line with so many of the things that we seem to have been putting together over the last number of years, at least since I've been here, from, Tech Village to the DDA to, economic development, to looking at our non-motorized plan and paying some real attention to the north part of the town. And of course, emphasizing more in quality code enforcement. That's one thing that was referenced as well. Folks are pretty happy with the code enforcement in town.
Let's go to Ms. Lane, and then Mr. Mansour, and then Mr. Guzak. So, Ms. Lane.
I've had a chance to do a short perusal of the draft, and it is astounding. I've been here enough years that I've been through umpteen of them, and this is really a really good product that's coming forth from the Planning Commission.
Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mansour.
Yeah, I'd like to make two points. First, part of the reason that we were able to reduce the cost of this is because we have a planning director. So you can kind of look at that as being an offset to some of the money we would have normally paid an outside firm. So in that respect, that's really in line with what we plan to have in terms of a planning director and his responsibilities and participating in this. So that's part of a plan that's in action and working. The other point that I'd make is that this draft that's going out for public and interagency review is a lot of time and effort was spent on it. And public input was received at the very beginning, and of course a lot of contributions from various people to it along the way. But this next 63 days is really an opportunity for the general public to really weigh in on this. And so I would encourage us to really make a strong effort to promote, getting this out into the public, maybe having a couple of, hard to do in COVID times, but having a couple opportunities for us to have a live input from the community, because in the end, it's the community's plan. and we got our best foot forward here, but it's really going to be a lot more meaningful if we can really get some input from the public on this draft. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mansour. Mr. Guzak?
Yes, I'd like to thank Mr. Lloyd and also the Planning Commission for all the hard work that they've done. It's nice to have an on-staff planning person here, and I can really see the difference, and I'm sure glad that he's here, and he's done a great job, and thanks for getting this thing together, and I'm looking forward to having some more Zooms with the people so that we can get some feedback from them. But thanks again to you and your crew, because I know the Planning Commission, we've met with them a couple times, the board has, and I know they're hardworking people, and they've been servicing our township for many, many years, and they don't even, they're just on our commission board, and they've been there helping us all along, and they deserve a lot of credit, as well as you, Mr. Lloyd, for getting this accomplished.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? I believe there was a motion and a second, Ms. Lane?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Ready for the roll call?
Sure, yes.
Mr. Mansour,
Yes.
Mr. Massey,
Yes.
Mr. Atkins,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mr. Guzak,
Yes.
myself, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Lloyd, and we look forward to getting the public input. So
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thanks.
I'll pass this along.
Okay, next item on the agenda is that Supervisor Bennett will update the board on first responder hazard pay premiums program and the public safety and public health payroll reimbursement program. So first on the hazard pay, actually we were notified that it's been confirmed that we will receive the $1,000 for each firefighter and police officer for the total of $75,000. It's listed on public website that the state put out, and it lists pretty much all the communities that applied. Our motion that we had back in, I think it was basically July 9th of 2020, was that the funds, let's see here, motion by Trustee Massey, supported by Trustee Guzak, to apply to the state for the first responder hazard pay premiums program in the amount of $75,000. The funds distributed are contingent upon funding approval from the state. So they have been approved by the state. We need to pay them out before the end of the month. We're supposed to be getting the payment in our account on the 30th, but it's confirmed from the state that we will be receiving the funds. So that's great news. The other thing that, I'm sorry, Mr. Massey?
I want you to complete your thought. I just have a question about something you just recently said.
Okay. The other portion of this item was that we did apply for funding from the Public Health Payroll Reimbursement Program, and we applied for a little over $900,000. And actually what the state did is they said, you know what, we're going to give about 50% of the requested amount to all the applicants. So actually we received word that we received $449,658. And so 50% of the requested amount. And I'd like to thank our staff, especially Melissa Roberts, for putting together that along with Colleen Nizwicki, our HR specialist, or generalist. They put in a lot of time along with our police chief, fire chief, and putting these numbers together. But anyways, it's a reimbursement. We're looking into legal issues on how we can use these funds. So we've worked with our finance director, Kathy Solstack, and we're placing them in what's called a liability account for the time being, just to make sure that how we use those are proper and legal before we utilize any of those funds. So we're going to be doing some homework on it, because there's some question. Some people are telling us it can be used for anything in your general fund, and we're hearing other stories. So we want to get that confirmed before we put those funds to any use. So we're setting them aside for right now. We also received word that in terms of any kind of the shared revenue, it looks like that's been actually coming in stronger than we predicted, and that we probably right now they're saying maybe a $80,000 hit to our budget. So things are looking up financially right now for the township in terms of making it through this COVID shutdown, and it looks like we're going to be able to pay our first responders some hazard pay $1,000 each, and we're going to have some money to make up for any shortfalls, at least what's being predicted. But again, nobody has a perfect crystal ball. Mr. Massey, you got a question?
Yeah, Mr. Supervisor, you mentioned we have to pay the first responders by the end of the month.
Yes.
Will we be able to make that?
Yes.
Does the board have to, well, I guess my question is, when we approve it tonight, does that give you guys authority to start writing the checks?
Actually, the motion already gives us the authority. We don't even need the motion. The motion that was passed back, that I said in July 9th of 2020, was basically that we can apply for the funds and distribute them contingent upon funding approval from the state. And we did receive approval from the state, so we can go ahead and distribute those. We're supposed to have...
We don't have to vote on this item C tonight.
No. It's just an update to let you know where we're at. Okay? So does anybody have any questions with regard to either of those items?
That's great news.
Yeah, I mean, close to 500,000, well, over 500,000
awesome.
Combining the two. So we just want to make sure we do everything legal and proper in terms of how we use these funds in terms of the reimbursement. So we'll be working on that as well. Okay? And that's in addition to the grant that we're working on for Baldwin Road for close to $6 million. That really is a huge grant, a lot of work going into that. Okay, item D, the board will review the policy regarding trustee access, which was drafted in response to the employee grievances. Everybody received a copy of the policy. I don't know if anybody has any thoughts or questions on it. Mr. Lane?
In reviewing it, the facilities and the meetings are almost identical, word for word. My concern is, I know we want trustees, especially the new ones that are coming on, to be able to interact with our staff. And I think this policy has restricted trustees' access to employees even more than residents. Residents can come in on a daily basis and ask to talk to a department head without getting permission from the township supervisor, the township superintendent, and going through all of this. So I am not convinced that this particular draft of a policy is beneficial for the Board of Trustees. I, of course, want everyone that comes into the township to act professional and to learn, especially the trustees, to learn how the township operates so they can make better decisions. But I think it's going too far when it has to be, questions have to be submitted to the township supervisor or superintendent, and their questions have to be approved by them. And so that's not a good procedure because it's so limiting to trustees.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the first draft, and so I think, you know, if everybody wants to take a look at it and make whatever suggested changes to it, you know, we can do that. But we had to have a starting point somewhere. I guess, you know, the challenge is that, yeah, as residents that have questions with regard to whether it's their utility bill or, you know, voting questions, what have you, obviously they need to be able to talk to somebody in that department. I think this is more regarding internal operations that we're looking at, you know, but how do you, you know, the issue is how you put this in the form of a policy to delineate between those two types of things, and that's the challenge here. Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so thanks. I mean, I read the policy, And I mean, I really have to question the underlying rationale, for this policy. I mean, ostensibly it was the grievances that were written, and read the grievances, and it turns out that there were no specific employees that were listed on those grievances as being harmed. So, really, if we have a policy we're thinking of enacting here, we'd really, I think, need to understand some of the more specifics so that we can make sure that this policy would be the best remedy. And I think, looking at anything before we have those names would be premature. So that's to even question, if it's really time to look at this and to know if the items that we're citing here are really the right ones. And, one of the other things that, I also look at the policy like this. I mean, you can say that it might be a way, you could interpret this as a way to hide, bad behavior in the township. So, for instance, if, we happen to have, we happen to have a situation where we've dedicated township office space to a non-employee, which I think is illegal. So by restricting access, I mean, this really, doesn't allow, the kind of oversight that I think the board should have on this. So in that respect, I don't think it's the right kind of policy at all, and not the right policy for now, from my perspective.
Let me just respond. I think I'll call on you next, Mr. Thomas. With regard to the employees' names, I'm not sure. I think we sent out to the board the complaint from the two different unions, the grievance complaint, as well as the investigation, the reports from the individuals that were part of the incident, or at least documented what their statements were. But I thought their names were in those documents. Am I not correct, Mr. Manser? I don't have a copy in front of me.
So you are. The names were not listed on the grievance. No. Which I said it seemingly right. Was all of the W and all of the V employees right. Were listed in the agreement, nothing specific.
Right.
But in the investigation, it is true that there were a couple of employees that were mentioned. One of which we had some discussion about earlier with Mr. Massey. Another one was Miss Hobson, who apparently wasn't even at the office during the time of this interaction. And I mean, I have to wonder, if it's common policy to kind of phone in grievances. So, I mean, if someone's not there, it's hard to see how they have a real grievance. Mm-hmm. And they can always question, is a person not there because it's they have a pre-approved time off, or are they not there because there's some other working arrangement allowed for them? But anyway, the point is that we have just a grievance by two units, by two specific ASME units. And again, if we want to go into some of the investigation, which was not corroborated, which was the cover letter, the investigation brought out a number of items, but none of which were corroborated, except that Mr. Massey was in the building at the time. But that's it. So I guess I'd like to have a little more understanding of the specifics around these grievances to make sure a policy could be effective. Thank you.
Yeah, what were a response to the grievance, because actually we have a certain number of days, I think it was 5 days or less maybe, to respond to the grievance, what the township is going to do to address these concerns. The only thing I can think of that we would do to address it was what we did. We restricted access to non-staff to the work areas, and we also said that we would develop a policy as to what is favorable interaction between staff and board members, as well as how we handle the personnel files. In terms of personnel files, there was some discussion on that too. We also spoke with the MTA on that issue, and yes, the board can ask for particular information from somebody's personnel file, but we can't go on a fishing expedition and say, hey, we want this person's personnel file just to look through and peruse. If there's a specific business purpose to why we want some piece of information from an individual's personnel file, we can request that, but it isn't, hey, we want to come in and look through somebody's personnel file. But in terms of, you know, whether or not we have a policy, our response to the unions were that we would develop a policy for what, you know, is a positive interaction. In terms of, you know, listing all of the employees that are part of V&W, it was the unions, and it wasn't a call-in grievance. It was by the employees that were here, and they felt as though they were being intimidated. So, Mr. Thomas, I think you had your hand up.
So I have two questions. One I'd like to direct to Attorney Laddie, and one I'd like to direct to you, Supervisor Bennett. To you, Supervisor Bennett, earlier tonight you said that somebody was on the phone texting you. This was during public comment, texting you about the incident. Could you tell us who that was? I'm tired of people alluding to names and...
Sure. It was Greg Boggs.
Okay. And Greg's the assistant DPW director?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the way I took the grievance is just basically said to cease and desist. I didn't really, that's how I read it. It said cease and desist the action. And I think that was handled the proper way. But through you to Attorney Laddie, is that okay?
Yes.
Attorney Laddie, so Mr. Mansour just made a comment about we're doing things illegal. And is it illegal for somebody to be in our building, given office space, with their names on the door, and they are an outside contractor?
I don't think it's
not the payroll.
I don't think it's necessarily legal, but I understand that it could be perceived as not the best idea. Consultants, imagine if, for example, I had office space in the Township Hall. That would be perhaps beneficial to you and me regarding saving money and being more efficient. But I don't think it's good practice in the long run. I understand though that particularly Mr. Potter works very closely with the DPW, that he works with.
Who are you talking about? I'm sorry, I don't even know. I'm just talking what Al said.
I'm assuming
there actually is an employee that's doing this?
I'm assuming that Mr. Potter has access to information in the DPW department. Who's
Mr. Potter?
I'm sorry?
Well, who's Mr. Potter that you speak of? I'm kind of lost here.
Dan Potter?
Dan Potter?
Dan Potter?
He's the one that the DPW consults. Consults.
Dan Potter is a consultant for Grand Blanc Township. Okay, and he works
at the DPW department.
No, for Grand Blanc, for you. He works for you.
Okay.
He's employed by Grand Blanc Township Board. It's his presence in the township, I think, is a better example. The need for him to be present in the township for various times is a better example than me being in the township hall. I see your police officers day to day, and 3 or 4 of your police officers come into my office every day. It would be more convenient if I was located on the township campus, but it isn't necessary. And I also have other clients, and there's also security issues that could be of concern. Mr. Potter, though, works directly with your DPW and works with data and information that's immediately on the site. So I agree that it's probably convenient to have him there. I also agree, though, that from a visual perspective or an optics perspective, it's probably not a good idea to have a consultant with their name on the door. I don't necessarily think it's illegal, but I don't. I'll leave it to you to decide whether that's the best way to go.
Yeah, I think we're getting off topic, but I don't even know that his name is on the door. But
well, I'm sorry. I was just shooting in the dark. I really didn't realize that Dan Potter's the one that has a private office on our
don't think he has. I don't think he has a private office. He just has a place where he goes.
Really?
He has a workspace within the township so that he can have his information there for working with our rate study and what have you, and being able to access the DPW information. I don't even know if he has, the door doesn't even shut all the way on his office, so I'm not even sure if I would call it an office. It's more like some extra space we had that we pushed him into, but I think...
for the waters.
That explains it. Okay, yeah. I just was trying to get it cleared up. I wasn't mentioning names. Is that the person through you, Supervisor Bennett, Trustee Mansour?
Well, and
is that what you were speaking of?
Yes. Yeah. We've also had consultants in the past before we had a full-time planner. Jill Bain worked here for years as our planning consultant, and we had an office for her where she came into and worked. We actually had an office schedule for when she'd be here, and she actually, met with clients and what have you here. Mr. Potter actually doesn't even meet with any clients. If he's here, I mean, we have a number of meetings each month that he's part of. So I wouldn't.
I'm fine.
Yeah. So let's get back. Okay, Mr. Massey.
Yeah. Yes. I'd like to say this about D. D is a solo case and a potential case and a blatant case for racism, Scott. Here you go again. You're blatantly trying to hide behind some policy.
Okay.
And you're full of racism.
You know what, Mr. Massey, I want to say something here. If you have something to substantiate that, please bring it up, but I'm not going to allow you to continue to make baseless accusations, okay?
I'm just telling you what you're about.
Okay.
This is it right here, deep, spells it out.
All right. Thank you.
Any lawyer looks at this, they would tell you this is racism.
Well,
how did it come about?
Actually, this is a lawyer that advised us on this, so...
I don't trust every lawyer that writes something.
Okay. Well, you said if you ask a lawyer. I'm telling you we did.
Furthermore, we made the wrong mistake because anytime there's a policy coming from the board, it's supposed to be written by the board attorney, not by no labor attorney.
Well, he is our board attorney, our board labor attorney.
He's not no board labor attorney.
Yes,
there
he
you
is.
Go again.
He is. You're wrong, Mr. Massey.
I'm telling you.
He is hired by the board, and he is our board labor attorney. The bottom line is that I want to walk through what happened with this grievance. We received a grievance from the attorney, or I mean from the unions, and we have a certain number of days to react. What we have to do is we have to investigate the claims that the grievance is making. We actually had our HR generalist sit down with each of the individuals that had interaction supposedly with Mr. Massey that day. Confirmed by videotape, let me tell you. We do have security tape that runs within the office, so we can confirm that the individuals that are noted in the grievance, it does show on video that those meetings took place between these individuals and Mr. Massey. Anyways, the bottom line is what they said I can't confirm. The video has no audio. However, we had our HR generalist sit down with each of these individuals and interview them about what happened and what was said. Those were put into statements that were put in writing. I had nothing to do with putting those in writing. Those statements were delivered to our labor attorney. We also had, we reached Mr. Massey on the phone, Chief Wiles and myself, and we discussed the matter with Mr. Massey. Nothing was brought up about racism or anything along those lines. As I mentioned before, one of the individuals that made the complaint is black, and he is okay with us putting his name out there. He came forward and put his name on the document as making the complaint. Those individuals, like I said, their information was documented along with Mr. Massey's interview was documented by Chief Wiles. We sent those to our labor attorney, and our suggested remedy to the union was that while we're not taking any position on who is telling the truth here, whether it's the employees making the complaint or Mr. Massey, we're not making a judgment in that regard, but that to remedy the situation, two things would happen. One is that for the security and concern that the employees had with regard to intimidation, that we would restrict access to the employee work areas. And secondly, that we would develop a policy that would protect both the township trustees from any kind of accusations as well as intimidation to the employees. So we developed that policy. I asked for some input from a couple of our staff members, our HR generalist, as well as one of our labor attorneys. They developed this draft and we present it to the board. So in terms of any blatant racism or what have you, I'm telling you the process that occurred. My only input was directing the investigation to move forward. Mr. Thomas, you had your hand raised, and then we'll go to Mr. Massey.
Yes. So just a couple things real quick. Do you want to the employees, including the attorneys, the labor attorneys, an employee to write a...
No, we did not. We asked...
Well, that's what you just said, Scott.
No, we had our HR generalist meet with each of the employees and document their statement. We did ask a couple of them to...
No, I'm sorry. What I was talking about was asking them to write the statute or the structure than how we're going to do this. You asked the employees.
No, we didn't ask them for. No. I asked our attorney to, with input of our HR generalist. Okay.
Okay, I got you now. So before our policy, our old policy, and I'm not sure why Dennis is changing this now, was that when Dennis told us that we would have to go, if we wanted to speak to an individual employee, that we would speak to the superintendent and go through him, our superintendent, and if it was fine with him, he called the director and then we would meet. Sometimes Dennis would be there, sometimes the superintendent wouldn't be there. It all depended on which type of situation. And I always thought that worked fine. It kind of sounds like that was Mr. Massey's plan when I guess he came to your office, Supervisor Bennett, but I'm not sure. But that's how I was always told. And isn't that the policy that we had written before? But this policy right now, I think it's overreaching, and I think we should leave it up. Like you said, you're not going to approve anything that this board does anyways, and you're going to wait to the new board. So in this case, I think the new board should make the decision. But going back, wasn't that the policy before, Supervisor Bennett?
Mr. Thomas, I don't know that we have any written policy with regard to that, but that certainly was discussed numerous times. I think that was our practice. And I think part of it is because, sometimes, if we have a board member asking for information from a certain staff person or even a department head, our superintendent or myself, directing the work to those individuals, we know what we have as a priority. And if a board member is coming to a department head or an employee asking for something, it can put them in an awkward position where, we've asked them to spend time on something and the board member's asking for something different. So that's the courtesy there. But I think you're right. In terms of Mr. Massey coming to my door, yes, I had a conference call that I was running that lasted well over an hour in the middle of the shutdown or whenever this happened, that trying to help a group of people. But the bottom line was, I think he was told by my administrative assistant that I would be on a call for a while. He did come to my door a couple of times, and I told him I'm going to be a while yet. And so, anyways, I was hoping that Ms. Roberts could help him or whoever, but I'm not sure the course of what happened when my door was knocked on versus when the other employees were contacted. Mr. Massey. Okay. Thanks, Mr. Thomas.
So I think you're right, Scott. I'm sorry, Supervisor Bennett, I think you're right. And, you know, I would hate to think that I don't think there's a racist bone in your body or my body or anybody else's. And it really hurts my heart that somebody's actually throwing GCs and dead animals on Mr. Massey and Mrs. Massey's yard. I mean, they're outstanding people. You know, I think the world of Joe. I think the world of his wife. And if somebody's really, I mean, if somebody's that vindictive, I'm sad. I'm saddened by it. But I feel awful that he feels that Mr. Massey feels that this was a racist act, and it really, really bothers me. Yeah. I know everybody in this board is not racist. We all love each other. We might not get along with each other all the time, but we all still respect each other. Wow. And, you know, deep down, heck, half this board, we all go to the same Holy Family anyway. So, you know, Joe, I love you to death, and it hurts my heart. And if anything I can do to reach out to you and your wife, I'll do whatever I can. And that's pretty much what I have to say.
And I think, you know, with regard to Joe's, you know, mentioning that issue, I hope that he'd filed a police report, and I would even suggest getting a Ring doorbell that actually, you know, I've got one or two on my house that actually will record anybody that comes into my yard or my driveway. So I would encourage looking at that as well. Mr. Massey and then Mr. Adkins.
Let me speak from experience, and you probably will deny this. The township has a history of racism. So when you look at D, you'll see what's hidden. Hidden racism will show its ugly face sooner or later in some fashion, whether it's in a written form, whether it's in assault, behavior type form. It will show its face. So the township doesn't have a good record when it comes to race equality. So you should know that. I know that, and everybody else know that has lived in this township for a long time. And when you can put in a document that you're so proud at the township hall that you only have one black employee, that's unacceptable with me. Yeah. That's sickening. That's just pure racism.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I didn't put anything in writing in that regard, but anyways, Mr. Atkins.
Is the heart of the matter, is it limiting access to department heads or limiting access to parts of the building? Or are they one and the same?
No, I think it's, you know, access to the building, Mr. Atkins. I think, you know, I don't mind anybody meeting with department head. And I think, you know, most of you feel free to call any of the department heads. I know for a fact, I mean, I know you, Mr. Atkins, you've contacted our chief of police. I don't have any problem with that. You know, contact our department heads, no issue, but it would be good if you could go through me, because I know, you know, then what kinds of concerns you have so that we can address them as a board, or there might be something I'm working on that I want to share with you. So I would just ask that if you want to email myself and the department head with regard to something that might be helpful. But, you know, I think the policy, it's a first draft. I would encourage everybody to take a look at it. And, you know, I don't have any thing that I'm going to gain by writing this thing, but I would encourage everybody to take a look at it and figure out how do we, you know, cut this thing in a way that is fair and still gives you the information that you need and future board members. So, Mr. Massey?
I'd like for everybody to know, the day I was in the building, okay, I spoke to the police chief for a few minutes. We wasn't talking about anything, and after we, when I say anything, it was just something personal between me and the police chief. We had a casual conversation going on. After I finished with him, he went a different direction. I told him I was going to knock on your door for the second time. Mm-hmm. I mean, he can verify that. If anything else beyond that, does it make sense for me to be talking to the police chief and I'm walking around and he's there too? And I mean, none of this makes any kind of sense now.
Yeah.
I don't like bringing in the police chief because I think a lot of him. He's done everything he possibly could to make Grand Blanc a friendly place to visit, and he welcomed. I don't think the chief is biased in what he does. I mean, he's a chief of police now. I didn't say he did everything that I like, but he does things according to the law. Let me put it that way. So, if that was intent to do harm to somebody, you think I would have stopped and had a conversation with the chief and we walked in the same direction? That doesn't even make any sense. I'm just saying what you all are trying to do. I'm just explaining it. Thank you very much.
Well, looking at the videotape, actually the chief came towards the end of your visit. But anyways, the bottom line is we've got a policy here, Mr. Atkins.
Yeah, I just believe that a lot of this could have been avoided. I believe it was encouraged from a very, very early on behind the doors agenda to get someone riled up to address this board in a very, very, very profound way that probably got some emotions running high. But I think leadership could have avoided a lot of these issues and definitely not have encouraged them.
Well, I'm not sure who you're referencing in terms of leadership encouraging this, but it certainly wasn't me encouraging it, if that's your accusation, Mr. Atkins. So the bottom line is this grievance was by 2 unions, and the employees are willing to put their name on the paper. I would encourage any of the public that's interested in knowing the details behind this, send a FOIA request to Ms. Lane and myself, and we will make sure that you get all the details for the employees that made statements with regard to what occurred. And you can make the judgment as to whether Mr. Atkins is correct in that the leadership of the township encouraged this, or this was something that happened spontaneously. Okay, Ms. Lane?
Mr. Chair, just for the public and Mr. Massey's information, I am not exactly sure of the count, but there are many or several police officers of many years of service, including one who was my former neighbor, so I'm guessing he's at least almost 20 years here. But there are several. I would say it's getting closer to maybe 6 of our police officers that are black, and they do an excellent job. So just so that you know that it isn't limited to just one person in our employ, and the firefighters again have African American brothers there too. So if we could, Mr. Chair, could we move on? We can all look this draft over, and I would say to end this, when you have a meeting that says they can't meet face to face, make telephone calls, or have other means of electronic communication, including emails with department heads, that's restricting these new trustees to learn almost nothing about how the township operates, and they need that knowledge to do their job effectively.
Okay. So, well, I would encourage each of you to take a look at it, and let's bring it back and see how you mark it up.
Okay.
So, all right. Okay, we'll move on to the next agenda item. I know Mr. Mansour asked, and I know Ms. Lane, you asked that we add the discussion with regard to the water ordinance. I don't have a copy in front of me, but I know Mr. Laddie drafted one a few months ago.
Item G first, Mr. Supervisor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Yep, you're right. You're right. I'm sorry, I missed that. The board will consider a motion to adopt the Dort Highway non-motorized pathway maintenance agreement.
I didn't see anything in the packet, Mr. Chair, on that, so I can't make an informed decision.
Okay.
I agree.
Mr. Laddie?
I can address it. And this, by the way, this is a document that was forwarded to us from the Genesee County Road Commission regarding, well, Mr. Supervisor, do you want to introduce the project that's the basis of this resolution? I mean, you're pretty well at that.
Right. We have received complete funding, or you know, with our portion, but we are going to be able to move forward with the non-motorized pathway between Baldwin Road and Cook Road. That actually has to be done at the same time that the road construction is being completed. They are starting on the phase 2 fairly immediately. We'll start putting in utilities during the winter months, and the road construction will start in the spring. But the utilities and much of the work will actually go on during the winter months. Phase 1, which is between the I-75 overpass and Cook Road, is slated to be done this next month, or in November rather. So we'll have both phases completed hopefully by next fall. That non-motorized pathway will go from Baldwin to Cook. The idea is then we will go after funding to take it down Cook Road under the underpass near Embury, and then follow Embury Road to Grand Blanc Road. So I know the residents in that area are very excited that been aware that we've been working on this, and we have been able to put together the thing that's going to be, you know, approaching $1 million when this thing is all said and done. What we need to agree to is the maintenance, and I apologize it wasn't in the packet. Nobody contacted me early on, otherwise we could have sent that out. But the bottom line is that we will get a copy. I mean, we've got some time. I don't know that we've got to agree on it tonight, but we can certainly send that out. But Mr. Laddie, is this similar to other agreements that we have with the County Road Commission, or?
Well, this is a little bit unique, but it's unique in a great way, because this is basically identifying the Genesee Road Commission as the agent to handle this portion of the $5.5 million grant. That is not all for non-motorized pathway, obviously, but that pathway is going to get built, and the road commission is going to be in charge of applying for that grant and also constructing that pathway. But they understandably are saying, look, this is Grand Blanc Township property, and when we get done building it, Grand Blanc Township has to make a commitment to maintain it. Maintaining pathways is not necessarily easy. It's not necessarily cheap, but it is, I think, probably a welcome burden when you consider the grant opportunities for us to have this built for us at very little cost. And so there is an obligation, and I want you guys to understand, and if Supervisor Bennett, if you think that we want to move this item to our next available meeting, that would be fine, because I want to make sure that we understand that there is an ongoing financial obligation to maintain the pathway, and also that we have a matching share of the grant that is tied into the Dordt Highway extension also. And so we're making a financial commitment to the project as a whole, but also a long-term commitment to the pathway, because we're going to own it. So I'm pleased to have you consider this resolution, but if you want to have some time to think about it and look at it, I don't think it has to be in by.
No, I don't believe so either.
2 weeks.
Yeah, let's put it on the next agenda and have the materials available, and so everybody can take a look at that, and the public can see what that agreement is as well.
Sounds good.
Mr. Massey and then Mr. Mansour.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to ask you one question. Something about a comment you made about the path versus Emory Road. Could you bring additional information in that regard? What would have to be done to Emory Road if the path is installed? Mm-hmm.
Well, we don't have we haven't done any engineering or design work on that yet. But the individuals that we work with in applying for these grants feel very strongly that once we get this stretch of pathway put in, the funding for the stretch between this Dordt Highway extension over to Embury and north on Embury, the funding for that will be much easier for us to obtain. But we have not done any engineering or asked for any engineering yet, but the idea is that as you approach Cook Road from the Dordt Highway extension, you would go east on Cook Road, and you would push back the underpass so that there would be room for a pathway between the pillars and the retaining wall or what have you, and then you would cross Cook Road right there and go down Embury to Grand Blanc Road. So we don't have any further information on that yet, Mr. Massey. I think Mr. Mansur had his hand up, and then we'll go to Ms. Lane.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, I didn't see this information in there either, so I'm anxious to take a look at it because it sounds like a really exciting thing to happen for our township, and getting it done with the Dordt Highway Extension is an efficient use of time and energy. I would like to request that included along with that is some kind of an estimate of the maintenance, the amount of money that it's going to be required for maintenance, whether it's on a per foot basis or an annual basis or something like that, just so we can start to integrate that into our budget discussions, which I think are happening soon as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we do maintain the pathway that's along Grand Blanc Road that's in the township as well, just everybody's information. So we can take a look at what our costs have been for that. This is entirely different type of pathway, but those are good concerns, Mr. Mansur, and we'll attempt to address those at the next meeting. Ms. Lane?
Explaining what actually gets done on the Grand Blanc Road pathway is, I think, of good use. But I also want to remind the board that I think less than a year ago, Consumer Energy was willing for like $1,700 to put in LED lights along Embury Road. And certainly if people are going to be bicycling on a pathway, the more lights the better, and the LED lights were minimal cost. But that was discouraged by some members of the board, thinking it would be intrusive to some of the businesses that were there. But I'd like to at least remind you that that is available through Consumer Energy.
Well, I think once we get some design started for the pathway, obviously we'll take a look at lighting. But I think right now would not be a good time to put lighting in there when we aren't even sure what side of the road or where this thing's going to have to go. I mean, we may end up moving some utilities. I have no idea. But one of the concerns when you put a pathway anywhere, I mean, the Dordt Highway Extension pathway is going to be relatively easy in terms of access to the property. Genesis is actually donating the property for the extension. When we go down Embury Road, we're going to have some concerns because those are individual property owners. I'm not sure we have enough right-of-way, or the county has enough right-of-way in all of those parcels to be able to just put the pathway there on our own. So we're going to have to work with some property owners when we do this, and not everybody's always really pleased to have a pathway running through their front yard, even or a business, us taking some of their space, whether it's parking spaces or driveway access or moving signage back. So I think we need to, it's going to take some work. We can't just say we're going to put a pathway down there. We're going to have to do some work with the property owners too. So we'll move that agenda item to the next meeting, and we'll try to have more information on each of those items that was brought up. Okay? Any other concerns with regard to the pathway? Okay. The next item is with regard to the water ordinance. And I don't have a copy, unfortunately, in front of me. We do have Reftelis, who is nationally known for their water rate study information. They've been working for quite a while on the study, and we are prepared to have their presentation beginning at our next board meeting, I believe, where they will actually go through an analysis of our rates. And I know, Mr. Mansur, you looked at peak levels of usage and whether or not, allowing people to disconnect for irrigation, if that would lower that rate. I know that they're looking at that. One thing to consider too, that without getting into specifics, but I am aware of situations where during the shutdown, water usage in some places has dropped dramatically. And when that occurs, we end up with stagnant water in some areas or some businesses or what have you, which doesn't cause an immediate problem. But, in the city of Flint, that's part of the problem. Legionella actually is caused by stagnant water when the chlorine levels aren't high enough. I'm not an expert in this area, but I think what we're going to do is listen to Raftellus, hopefully, and take their advice in terms of rates. I'm very curious because I think initially part of the information that I heard, and I don't have anything documented in front of me, but is that one of the things we need to be concerned about is when we start allowing anybody to disconnect from municipal water to irrigate, that it could cause our overall cost for the remaining customers to increase. So I'll be very interested to see that. In terms of some of these places, if they put in irrigation, we allow wells to be used when irrigation is being put in. But when we build a system to include irrigation, it's very difficult for us to resize our plumbing basically to say, hey, you know what, we're going to take this off the system and not resize the whole system that goes to that area without ending up with some other issues as I mentioned, stagnant water, what have you. But those things will be analyzed by Raftellus, and I guess I'm looking forward to hearing what the experts have to say on this issue. So, Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, so thank you for adding this to the agenda here. I'm looking forward to it as well. We've been having discussions about this rate study for probably a year now, I think, actually. And some of the requests from board members have been to take a look at what some of the initial assumptions were in terms of the rate study. And then I think I documented something to Director Sears and you a few weeks ago about walking that from the original assumptions to where we're ending today, just so we can have an idea of what the thought process is rather than just kind of a point in time. So I'm looking forward to that. But this topic was really, and the rates are important, but I mean, this topic is up here really because, we had interest in making sure that we were able to irrigate, use wells for irrigation. And we did some preliminary work on it. Attorney Laddie distributed to the board on September 9th the latest draft of this. I think he encouraged people to take a look at it and provide him some input. I know certainly I've done that, and I would look forward to being able to discuss this draft at the next meeting, in conjunction with the Raftellus topic. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Thomas, then Ms. Lane, and then Mr. Massey.
I'd like to be the second trustee to, like you said, you want to have at least two trustees as for something on the agenda. And I too would like to see the ordinance that Attorney Laddie wrote up to be on the discussion also. Thank you.
Yep, we said it would be, and I plan on having it on there along with the Raftellus presentation. Ms. Lane and then Mr. Massey.
For a clarification again to this board and to Mr. Laddie, if at all possible, because there's a first reading and then I have to publish in the newspapers and then a second reading before it can be formally adopted and printed in the paper. So if Mr. Laddie could clarify all of those steps for this board so they understand their time frame that they're under, so that this matter might be able to be resolved in a timely fashion.
Well, Ms. Lane, you're correct. Once the township board can adopt an ordinance at a regular meeting, and then though it needs because we're a charter township, we need a second reading. And in between the first reading and the second reading, it's important that ordinance be published. Now, the statutes have amended the definition of published to allow it to be distributed, but also posted on the website. But we, as a matter of precaution, have tended to publish in the paper summaries of the actual ordinances. So you need a first reading, and then you need a time to allow for publication, and then you need a second reading, and then it will be published in its final version, and then take effect after the publication.
Thank you.
Mr. Thomas? I think, wait, Mr. Massey. Mr. Massey had his hand up first, I don't know.
Yes. Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I'd like for all of us to keep in mind when we get to the next meeting and we have had an opportunity to really study this ordinance, is that this is not the first time we have granted, as trustees, someone to have a well. We've done that over the years since I've been on the board.
Yeah, our policy is when somebody's putting in irrigation, I believe, Mr. Laddie, if they're putting in irrigation for the first time, we allow them to connect to well, right? I mean, what we're talking.
Yeah. If they're not already connected to the system, then they, as a single-family residence, they've been able to ask for approval to have an irrigation well.
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
What we're talking about is disconnection. Mr. Thomas?
We're talking about connect and more than just a single-family user.
Right, okay. Mr. Thomas?
May I speak to Attorney Laddie through you?
Sure. Go ahead. Your system, we can't hear you, Mr. Thomas.
Can't hear you.
I didn't do that, by the way.
And just for the record, I did not touch the mute button for anybody tonight. So if anybody's claiming that I muted them, it must be the ghost here, because I have not
Maybe
muted.
call in.
If he gives me a call, I'll certainly patch him in.
Give him a call.
He's trying to connect to audio right now, I believe, but I think he's using his phone already. Mr. Thomas? Mr. Thomas, can you hear us? Mr. Thomas?
Yeah, can you hear me, Supervisor Bennett?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I was disconnected. Through you to Attorney Laddie, if that's okay.
Go ahead.
Attorney Laddie, is it possible, let's just say, just for example, if we voted on this ordinance tonight, would there be an opportunity to change from this between the first reading? So if we decide not to go through with the ordinance, do we stop it before the first reading?
It is theoretically possible to do that, but I would suggest that you not do that in this case, because first of all, the ordinance is pretty well finished for what I think you wanted to what you wanted to read, but also you've got it on your agenda for October 8th.
Right.
You've got a meeting coming up at the end of October. You all also have a meeting in the beginning of November, so if you want to start the ball rolling, you've got time to do that rather than to do something tonight. Because it is possible to amend an ordinance in between the first and second reading, but it's not the favored process.
And I'd like our residents to actually have a chance to see it before we take action as well. So, okay. Any other thoughts on? I'm sorry, I didn't disconnect Mr. Thomas. I just wanted to let you know he disconnected himself. So, anyways, anybody else have any input with regard to this? Otherwise, we will defer to our meeting on the 6th and 8th when we have Riftelis in to make the presentation and we get some facts and figures and how this will affect the overall ratepayers. Okay, so next item on the agenda is future agenda items, and I think we know what we've got coming up, a couple of items that we want to talk about, more information on the pathway, and then also the water rate study, and also the policy for board and staff. Mr. Mansour?
Yeah, I was just gonna, I think those three items are ones that I recall, and so I make a motion to adjourn meeting tonight.
Mr. Massey, I think, had his hand up. I'm not sure if he's seconding that or he's got a question. Mr. Massey?
Unmute.
You need to unmute yourself, Mr. Massey.
Mr. Chair, can you add to the agenda a report on the DDA?
Sure.
Downtown Development Authority?
Absolutely.
Okay, that's all. Thank you.
I'll support Mr. Mansour's motion, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Second.
All right, supported. Ms. Lane? Everybody needs to, I see. You
Mr.
guys.
Manscore?
You
Roll
need-
call vote, gentlemen.
Yeah, you guys need to
Yes.
unmute your lines if you're muted so you
Yes.
can hear you.
Mr. Massey?
Yes.
Mr. Atkins?
Yes.
Thomas? Just
Yeah.
wave your hand. Oh, okay. Mr. Gruzak?
Yes.
Myself, yes, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Good night, gentlemen.
All right.
Good night.
All right, good night.
Everybody.
Good night.